Hello? Hello? Yeah. Can you hear me? Ha. Come on.
Listening is a funny thing. For all the time that people spend communicating, have you noticed we don't actually teach students how to listen in schools? We tell them to listen, but we don't teach them how. Let's spend some time thinking about listening. We're going to use 3 academic models that describe different levels of listening effectiveness. Before digging in, here's a quick bit of trivia about listening. On average, people speak at 125 to 175 words per minute. However, people can digest information they hear at up to 450 words per minute. So I'm going to talk fast, bounce back and forth between the 3 models, so we can pull the best out of each. We'll also do a quick summary at the end. Let's go. The first model we'll check out belongs to Stephen Covey. You know, the 7 habits of highly effective people person. Mr. Covey's model proposes 5 levels of listening effectiveness. The first level is ignoring, which really isn't listening, or at least not even trying to hear what the other person is saying. The second level isn't much better, it's pretending. When you pretend, you absorb about the same amount of information as you do when you ignore, but pretending has the added benefit of you deceiving the speaker into thinking that you're actually listening. Covey's third level of listening is where you actually start paying attention, at least a little. This level is considered selective listening, where you listen for information you want to hear and ignore the rest. One of the first people I managed was a selective listener, especially when I had constructive feedback to discuss with her. We'd sit down, talk about a scenario, and discuss what she could have done differently or might do differently next time. We'd also acknowledge what the other person might have done differently. Often she would summarize our discussion at the end of our talk, focusing 100% on what the other person did wrong. Even if she was internalizing the feedback and reflecting on the opportunities to do things differently next time, chances are she was just being a selective listener. Let's switch gears. Zweifel's first 2 levels of listening are the same as Covey. His third level is controlling. Some listeners use body language or other cues to direct a conversation and influence the outcomes. Have you had an experience where you've pitched an idea to a coworker or a boss and then adapted the content of your pitch based on negative feedback you're receiving during the discussion? Zweifel's fourth level of listening is projecting. Similar to controlling, the projecting listener is also guiding the content and direction of the discussion. Here's a fun example of a projecting listener.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great.
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good, though.
It could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was terrible.
Get him away!
Hey, boo!
Boo!
The last model to introduce is Sharmer's. His first level of listening is downloading. This is where you listen to the other person with a focus on confirming things that you already know. Sharmer's next level of listening is debate. Someone that has adopted a debating listening style is paying attention for information that doesn't match what they already know or believe. They focus on these divergent points, asking questions or even, you guessed it, debating them. This marks a transition point where we'll start moving into more constructive listening levels. Covey's attentive listening is where you actually focus on what the speaker is saying as well as the energy behind their words. Sharmer calls his third level of listening dialogue, or empathetic listening. This is where you start to move to a deeper level of understanding and connection with the speaker. When you're willing to start seeing through the other person's eyes, we can have dialogue. Zweifel's fifth level of listening is respect. This is where you start to hear the content of what is being said, nothing more, nothing less. His sixth level of listening is empathizing, which begins to focus on the other person's feelings and state of mind. With empathetic listening, one is focused and understanding on the intent beyond the words. Empathetic listening is also Covey's highest level of listening. Sharmer and Zweifel go on to recognize generative listening. Generative listening is different than empathetic listening in that the listener actually helps and encourages the speaker to create new insights and a better understanding of the information at hand. Beyond generative listening, Zweifel explicitly calls out generative silence. Periods of silence are natural in an empathetic conversation. For example, have you ever had a friend say, "I don't need you to say anything, just knowing I have your support is enough"? Generative silence is understanding when the right moment is to speak and when it's time to continue the silence. Greenleaf suggested that leaders should ask themselves whether saying something that's on their mind will actually improve on the silence. Another version of this thought has been attributed to Abraham Lincoln and Mark Twain. Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt. Finally, Zweifel recognizes that listening to listening is the ultimate level of listening. Say that 4 times fast. Listening to listening is simply paying attention to how we and others listen during conversations. Great speakers are aware of how their message is being received as they speak. This means they're constantly adapting their approach to match their audience's needs. Listening to listening is the same way, paying attention to how you listen so that it can improve on the conversation. Consider this, when you listen, you only receive about 7% of the information from the actual words being used. You receive about 38% of the information from the speaker's tone of voice, and you receive about 55% of the information from nonverbals, such as facial expressions and body language. You might say that listening to listening isn't just about hearing the words that are spoken, but paying attention to the other person in the conversation. Robert Greenleaf said, "People grow taller when you listen to them." If the role of a servant leader is to grow and develop your teams, then I think this is a great metaphor for us to end with. Be conscious of how you're listening so that you can help those that you serve grow and develop into great leaders themselves. Thank you.